Pre-show quid pro quo. Kyle, you get one question. Any question in the world. It could be about my sex life. It could be about magic. It could be about what I had for breakfast. Any question. But realize this, at the end of the episode, I get to ask you any question in the world as well. Kyle, go ahead. Shoot.
Well, growing up, what was your favorite Canadian rock band?
My favorite Canadian rock band growing up? Does Sharon, Lois, and Bram count?
You know what? I come on. I love Sharon, Lois,
Rock band?
Bram.
Okay, I guess my favorite Canadian rock band. I'm going to be lame, and it was the Tragically Hip.
That's fine. That's
No,
great.
for people that don't that are outside of Canada, we kind of have this national band. They're the unofficial band of Canada. They were called the Tragically Hip. The main songwriter and lyricist and vocalist for the band, his name was Gord Downie. He passed away. Was it just last year?
It was, within the past 2
Yeah,
years, I'm not sure.
yeah. He passed away from brain cancer, a very horrible form of brain cancer. It was a national mourning for this guy. But I just remember enjoying everything that the Tragically Hip put out. They, to this day, when I hear certain songs from them, it brings me back to that youth, and
Yeah.
I absolutely adore everything that Tragically Hip. People don't realize though that the band Men Without Hats are from Canada, and the Safety Dance is a classic. No, it's got to be the Tragically Hip. Even if you don't know about Canadian music, they still have some great songs. It starts and it ends with the Tragically Hip as far as Canadian rock is concerned.
That is absolutely fair.
Hey everybody, welcome to What Magic Is This? A podcast that reminds you that no, listening to Eric Burdon and the Animals does not automatically make you an animist. In this podcast, we're going to be talking about magic, the occult, the esoteric, the paranormal, the supernatural, and the weird. My name is Douglas Batchelor, and today I am joined by my guest, Kyle. Kyle, how are you doing today?
Doing well, brother. How are you?
I'm just fantastic. So, if you haven't listened to the podcast before, I give my guests a series of about 25 topics that they can pick, and they get to choose. I have no choice in the matter. Right now, we're kind of trying to lay some foundations as far as this whole magic thing, because this podcast is not aimed at people that are overly familiar with magic, but people that are somewhat curious about it in some way, shape, or form. So the topics, they've been pretty broad. They've been about things like dreams and consciousness and the imagination. Kyle, you chose the very interesting and still somewhat broad topic of magic tools or magical tools. I just want people to know that when I do my episodes, I put in about 10 to 12 hours of actual research and formulating the episode. When I sit down to record with my guest, I usually have a stack of about 20 to 25 cue cards that have a ton of writing on them on both sides, and it has anecdotes on there, and it's got quotations, and it's got dates and timelines and this kind of thing, because I think that my favorite podcasts are the ones that do a great deal of research, things like hardcore history. A couple of times I've had guests on, and then they kind of say, Doug, I love you, but what if you did a podcast recording where you don't have these cue cards? I go, what? What do you mean? They say, Doug, you already know this stuff. This is all in your head already. Like, you might not get the dates right or specific or the quotes perfect, but it's all up there, Doug. Just forget about it. And I say, no, I need my safety blanket cue cards. Anyways.
All right.
This episode will probably be released on Halloween, of all days.
All right.
So this is going to be a weird one because I actually didn't do a ton of research for this episode. I literally have one cue card, and I've written only, I think, 6 words on the back of it. I'm only going off of one side here.
One card
podcast.
I'm excited. I'm down for that because the reason why I chose this was come out of it with sort of a list. A list to start with.
A list of magical tools.
Yeah.
A list of what direction to go.
More so wanting to, as you brought up earlier in your podcast, the idea that, getting a little more into the magic. Right. And right now with this, to start off with the tools, I think is an interesting way for me to be able to be introduced.
Yeah, we are let's just say a somewhat material society. We like our things. We enjoy our things, and magical tools, they are things.
Fair.
So let's dive in here.
All right.
Kyle, and let's kick this off. This new conversational style of
Here we go.
Of what magic is this? All right, is everybody ready? Here we go. So magical tools, what are they? Well, to put it bluntly, magical tools are basically materia that you use to help with spells, with invocations, with evocations, with rituals, with theurgy. They're basically things that you acquire or create to help you with your magic for it to be efficacious. There's the question, are magical tools necessary? In my experience, I have never met somebody, a magician, who merely by waving his finger in the air, he's able to make things happen. That is the goal, though, I'd think. I'd really like to think that that's possible, that tools are necessary. They not only help, they bolster the spells that a magician does. Strangely enough, some people could say that the body is a tool. I know a lot of magicians that are in the arts, or they're dancers.
I think in regards to calling your own body a tool, that's a conversation we could have. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that they are needed, and the tradition of magic, if there is indeed a linear tradition, I think it's a little bit more chaotic than a line. Tools have always kind of been there. You think of a magician, you think of having like a wand or like a cauldron, the witch's cauldron.
Fair.
Yeah,
that's fair. A wand is definitely
exactly.
one thing that comes to mind.
You just otherwise it's just a guy gesticulating very, very oddly. So,
yeah,
it might as well be a conductor.
It all depends on the hat, right?
Right, it's all because that's exactly it. When the idea of magical tools is brought up, most magicians would think of 4 objects. These are called the magical weapons, or they're called the elemental weapons. And specifically, they are the wand, the sword, the pentacle, and the cup. And what they're meant to represent are the 4 elements, the 4 classical elements. So we've got representing air would be the sword, representing fire would be the wand, representing water would be the cup, and representing the earth would be the pentacle or the coin. Now, this is mainly a holdover from the Golden Dawn. I've railed on about them in previous episodes. If this is your first time coming in, all you have to know is that they're a 19th century occult order where I would say a ton of what is considered modern magic comes from. They're kind of the ones that provided this. They were big into the elements, and they were big into these tools to represent aspects of the elements themselves. As you might very well guess, if you ever picked up a pack of tarot cards, these are listed as the kind of suits of what is called the minor arcana. And they have the sword, the coin, the wand, which in previous incantations was the baton, and the pentacle. Wand, cup, sword, pentacle. And this equation to the tarot is something that I've also talked about ad nauseum in the last couple of episodes. It was a creation. Well, it wasn't a creation. It was popularized by Eliphas Levi. He thought that the Kabbalistic tree of life. He said that the 4 elements represent the 4 letters of the Hebrew name of God, Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. He's just trying to put those letters on absolutely everything. And it drives me nuts. But this is kind of like, it's a holdover. It will not go away.
All right.
And what's even more interesting is that, to begin with, the tarot, I'll go into it more during the tarot episode. Levi, in a way, got one thing right in that he said that the tarot came from Egypt. And as much as we'd like to say that it didn't, it actually kind of did. And they were called the Mamluk playing cards. And they had, 4 suits, just like the playing cards that we have now. We have spades, hearts, diamonds, and clubs. They had swords, all right, check, tarot. They had coins, check, tarot. They had cups, check, tarot. And then they had polo sticks, which eventually became baton. And then eventually, because they were like, oh, that doesn't look very magical, a baton or a polo stick, we're just going to call it a wand. There we go. We've got a wand. Perfect. It's all sorted there. Again, I don't really fall into this whole elemental magic thing. I barely use it. If it's your jam, you do you. That's totally cool. But I have a problem with it, and it's a problem that people like Stephen Skinner and David Rankine have had as well, is that why are swords equated with air instead of fire?
They're cutting through air, but they're being...
I see a wand swishing through the air more than I see.
Yeah.
The Golden Dawn had this whole thing where it's like the sword represented the airy intellect. How it could cut through bullshit and discernment, and no,
I don't agree with that either. That's some bullshit on its own.
Exactly. Have you ever heard of Kiki or Boo?
No.
It was kind of neuralistic programming where they would draw like a spiky object, kind of like looked like a sea urchin, and then they would draw like a blob, and they would ask which one would be Kiki and which one would be a Boo.
Okay.
Like Kiki would be the kind of spiky one. Kiki looks spiky, and a Boo kind of like looks like a boo, like a blob.
Yeah,
right?
Gotcha.
If you were to do the same things with the elements, and you had a fire and a cloud, and then you say which one represents which, I think most people would say, oh, the sword is the fire. Like a sword is forged in the fire.
Sword just like, well, that's exactly it.
It's a harmful thing. It's hurtful and
it's forged in the fire. When you think about it,
if used properly, it's a powerful tool. Whereas a wand is more airy. It's cut in the early morning, when the wind starts to blow. That's one of that kind of thing. So I think this is hopefully starting to switch. And if you do practice elemental magic, I would suggest that you switch to this system. I know other magicians that already have. Again, I don't really go in for the whole elemental weapon thing. It's very popular within the Golden Dawn. I'll stop doing that. It's only funny once. Here's the weird thing, though, is that I have all these things in my house. I've got swords on the wall. I do have a pentacle. I don't really have a cup. I've got vessels that I use, and I've actually got quite a few wands. Anyways, what can you do? As far as tools are concerned, when somebody says, what tools do I need to become a magician? Well, I say, what kind of magic do you want to do? Right? Because tools are very technique specific. So let's say you want to do tarot divination or fortune telling. Well, you're going to need some tarot cards, right? If you're going to do scrying, you're going to need to get yourself a black mirror, or you get yourself a large copper bowl or a metal bowl in which you can pour wine, anything that kind of has a darker surface. I know people that will put stones in the bottom of these bowls and look into them. Shiny stones like hematite, which is actually my birthstone.
All right.
So if you're going to do pendulum divination, you don't need to go and just buy yourself like a tripod. Just make them out of sticks. Get a ring and attach it to a string. You've got yourself a pendulum.
I like that. I'm interested, as you were saying, the idea of making them rather than just buying them.
Right. The techniques that you want to do, they usually have tools, and books are quite good at telling you what to get. The magical tools depend on what you want to accomplish and your goals and what you set out to do. You need these things. You do need these things. The tools were made specifically for this kind of function, or they were found out to be effective at these tasks and these techniques. There's kind of some non-standard tools that I think we have to get out of the way. As I said, the books usually mention what kind of tools you need. I mainly get my magic through the grimoires. They will usually have a list of what tools you need, and they'll even have the circumstances in which those tools are to be constructed. The kind of my go-to grimoire is called the Hygromantia, and it literally has the knife has to be made in the day or the hour of Mars.
Okay.
And it's like they really go to task with you need to have these things done. The knife has to have killed a person beforehand.
All right.
And this kind of thing. And
it's exciting.
The problem with the grimoires is that in this day and age, you can actually be a little bit more loose with these kind of things. I mean, if you can forge a knife in the hour of Mars or the Laman or the Ring of Solomon, these have specific times to do this. I've had results even without following these specific guidelines, but I don't not have these things. Right? Like,
gotcha.
The book says have these things, do them this time. I'm pretty good at getting away with just having the things. But I mean, my knife, It's not black-handled like they say it's supposed to be in the Hygromantia. It's actually it's a kukri knife. Anyways, it's a Gurkha knife. It's kind of got a curved blade. The handle is made out of bone, and it's a white handle. It's got some history to it. It's from Nepal.
All right.
Anyways, I also have an Athame. It's a black-handled knife, which is actually a Skeandub, which is a Scottish blade that they tuck into their socks that they use to cut fruit and cheese and stuff like that. But it's got a black handle. It looks badass.
Yeah.
And my uncle had a story of, you can't unsheath that knife, Doug. If you do, you have to draw blood. I'm going to actually be bringing my uncle up a couple of times in this episode because he's a very important figure in my life, and especially in acquiring my magical tools. Whether, he didn't know that he was helping me, but he did. Yes, the grimoires, they have a list of all the things you need. The Key of Solomon, one of the most popular grimoires, will say, you need these things, but they also don't mention that there's other items you'll need to have, especially with creating things like oils or incense. You can create your own incense, but the grimoires don't say you'll need a mortar and pestle. You'll need a cutting board. You'll need some sieves. You'll need some storage jars. You'll need bowls. But this kind of stuff is very important. I keep going to this comparison, but kind of consider yourself a cook. Sometimes a cook needs more than just a pots and pans. They can't do everything with their hands. They need the proper tools. And a mortar and pestle, more than my knife or any kind of wand that I've ever used. I probably use that more getting prepared to do a magical operation than the supposed needed tools of magic. So those things are definitely needed. If somebody was to point a gun to my head and say, Doug, what is you cannot not have this magical tool? I'd say, can I mention two? And they say, absolutely. I say, you need to have candles and you need to have incense, I think.
Okay.
And it's something weird. The fire brings in, it's kind of like brings in the campfire element. And if you think magic is more about spirit contact, I've talked about this so many times on my show. It's where do you fall in the magic? Do you think it's about visualization and meditation, or do you think it's about spirit contact? I mean, the two can't be mutually exclusive, but I think it's more for active spirit contact. There's something about fire. They're attracted to fire, and they also like good smells. They like interesting smells. So for incense, frankincense is kind of like the go-to, but you could have sandalwood, you could have myrrh, you could have woodruff. No candles, no incense. I don't think you're going to get a very good result. And one of the easiest spells that I tell people doing magic, if they're feeling stuck in life, it's kind of a 1-2 punch. They're called abre caminos. They mean open road or way opener. If you're feeling stuck in life, what's better than doing a spell that give me a new possibility, open a road for me? They're extremely effective. But two things I think that every magician should have, no matter what kind of magician you call yourself. You need candles, you need incense. I'm sure every other magician has said the same thing. Guess what? They're right. You need these two things.
All right.
Very little magic is done in the wash of a high-definition television. I'll just put it that way.
You should probably use light bright, though.
Yeah.
You bring out the 80s light brights.
There you
You're
go.
going to have yourself some. Come on.
This kind of thing was brought up in a really great book about magical tools called Goetic Pharmakos by Jake Stratton Kent. I've talked about him previously. But he basically says, yes, the grimoires tell you to have these things, but they don't tell you how to make certain objects or acquire them. If creating your own oils or dusts or powders, this is the book to have. It's a very short book, but it's a very good one. Another thing that Jake Stratton Kent has brought up, I believe in a book called Howlings, or it could be in Conjure Codex. Anyways, I'm just going through my mental Rolodex. He says one thing that every magician needs, and I don't know if I would consider this tools, but I'm going to just say it anyways, is an herb garden.
Okay.
You need an herb garden, and I do have one. I do like the fresh herbs to use. I will dry them out. I will mix them with the mortar and pestle. I will do all that kind of crazy magical wizard shit that you see, or the witch shit.
Love it.
Outside my back door, I have St. John's wort. I will use the dried ends of a St. John's wort stem, and I will create I believe it's called an aspergillum or aspergillus. It's basically I take the strands and I tie them up at the end, and then I dip them in holy water to sprinkle on certain things. But a herb garden with fresh herbs, lavender, rosemary. There's
sage and such.
Sage,
yes.
Absolutely. I do have sage growing. Herbs, absolutely essential. Not just dried herbs, but fresh herbs as well. So you've got all your magical tools. I'm hoping you just didn't order it from Amazon. But even if you did, I've done it. I'm not going to say I haven't done it. You get it, and what do you do with it? I'm hoping you just don't take it out of the box, unwrap it, and then you're good to go. I think with this kind of stuff, there's going to be some ceremony to it. You have to purify it. You have to consecrate it, and sometimes if it's a effigy of a saint, I do a lot of saint-based magic. I always have. You've got to do something to wake them up, to wake up the statues, to kind of give them that animistic zing to them. So the purification and consecration, very important. Purification more so for things that might be a little bit malevolent. You kind of know when you're holding, again, this sounds like New Age bullshit, but you kind of know when you're holding something, whether it needs to be purified. As far as consecration, with more holier objects, I try to do that. As far as the waking up, I do a ritual where I try to see myself seeing through the statue's eyes. I kind of enlighten them, and it's to this day it's almost like I can see through my statue's eyes. It's very, very strange. Shoe stones, because they're hewn from the earth, you kind of want to do a little bit of magic on them to get whatever earthbound demons are in there. You want to get them. Again, this sounds like New Age stuff, but I think you don't just get the object, take it out of the box, just rip her. Like you have to do something to these things, and that's part of what makes an animist-based magic, which is what I'm all in on, more enchanting. I'm enchanting my existence. I'm enchanting my story, if you will. And just a little note on crystals. Crystals are a weird one for me. I have an ambivalent relationship to crystals, which is strange because my father is a geologist. He studies rocks, and that might be part of it. I think I'm going to accrue some ire here, but I think a lot of the whole crystal-based magic, a lot of that is very neo-pagan bullshit. But this is coming from somebody that I can point to at least 6 crystals in my room. But I just see the proliferation of crystals in New Age or occult stores, and it just kind of makes me a little bit sad. They do look pretty.
They look pretty. That's what I'll give them. I mean, I do enjoy stones and crystals and such, and I've had people around me in my childhood and my life who have strongly believed in their crystals and such, and for me, it was more so just some things you like, some things just because of the way they look, and then sometimes you hold and it feels nice, sure, but putting too much of investment into things like that, you start to cross the line, and it's a little bit too much for me.
Again, I say I'm a little bit ambivalent towards the whole crystal stuff. I do like rocks. I have not an obsession, but I do a lot of my magical workings with obsidian. I have an obsidian ball. I have an obsidian shoe stone, which I work with quite a bit, and also hematite. I've always loved hematite, and then it wasn't until about 4 years ago that I found out it's actually my birthstone, strangely enough.
There we go. What? My thing is, in regards to any sort of crystals or things like that, if you're looking for the positive, maybe a little bit of direction and where you want to do with your life, sure, whatever makes you happy. But if you have any sort of negative, like, oh, don't do this or whatever, just because of a stone or because of astrology, numerology, stones, and New Age fun, as long as you're, happy.
As long as you're happy.
Then I got nothing against it.
Yeah, no,
I'll leave it at that because that's about it. And that's as far as I'll go with it. If you're happy, right on. But as soon as people start going, ooh, and trying to, that's where I'll check out from there. I guess for me, it's just one of those things where it's not that I dislike neo-paganism. I think a lot of neo-paganism is very iffy. It seems more like cultural appropriation in neo-paganism, neo-shamanism. It's a lot of cultural appropriation. I've never really jived with that. Anyways, there might be something Freudian about the fact that I don't go all in on crystals because of my father being a geologist. I was surrounded by crystals. It's odd. I can walk into a room and I just know the name of every. It's kind of silly because I was raised in Alberta, on the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, no less. And we'd be driving anywhere, really. And my father would pull the car over to make us look at rock formations. Like, that's the kind of, Yeah. He was also the cool dad that would, we used to go to Brooks Dinosaur Provincial Park, and we used to go outside of the areas that you were supposed to go, and we'd find pounds and pounds and pounds of huge dinosaur bones, teeth, skin.
yeah, he was a great dad in this respect. But yeah, instead of instead of taking us in to show us, I don't know, the world's largest hockey puck, he would pull the car over and show me like a shale cliff and talk about all of the trilobites that you could find. I remember going to the Burgess Shale. I remember he took us to Burgess Shale, and we would take rocks and just break them open and bring.
See, that's what I was going to ask. That's exactly what I was going to ask. If you had any of those cool moments where you crack them open and have those beautiful little gems inside.
I just remember the amount of these rocks that you'd just be able to crack like with a simple rock hammer, and you just have hundreds of things that were alive millions and millions of years ago.
Yeah.
So anyways, it's maybe something I have to confront within myself, my strange hesitance towards rocks. But that being said, we're going to move on.
All right.
This whole purification and consecration stuff, I think one of the most effective ways of doing this is, and this might not jive, but again, I go all in saint-based magic, is holy water. I think holy water is a very essential tool for magicians. I can just speak for myself. My favorite church is not too far away. It's dedicated to Our Lady of Lourdes. And I've always kind of been obsessed with Marian apparitions. I read a lot of Jacques Vallée. So this is an important church to me. And I go there, and I don't steal their holy water, but I go in, I light a candle for the church. I make a donation. I'm not stealing from the church, but to me, holy water is a somewhat essential tool, especially in saint-based magic. It's very important. There's some less than obvious tools that I think magicians should have, or at least ones that I use specifically. I don't know if we call them tools for magic, but tools to aid in magic. I live in the downtown core of a large North American city, and it is very, very loud where I live. And I would say the one thing that goes through pretty much all of the spells that I do at my house are earplugs. My earplugs are an absolutely essential tool. They allow me to hear my breathing. They allow me to hear the voice reverberating in my head almost. I would suggest people give it a shot as well, even if you don't live in a loud area. It's kind of crazy how changing one small aspect or playing with one sense that you rely on so often can kind of bolster your magic in a strange way. A lot of my magic is dream-based as well. Dreams, lucid dreaming, hypnagogia, hypnopompia. So earplugs, I sleep with earplugs as much as possible. I use a sleep mask. These are kind of less than obvious magical tools. A lot of people, when they start off with magic, they say you have to learn to meditate. I think meditation is very important, and I think focus through meditation is extremely important, and it's something you got to do. I was diagnosed as being ADHD when I was younger. I have a hard time keeping still, as you can see, while I'm wildly gesticulating in front of you here. So
I know you're talking to.
Yeah, that's right. It's one of those things where I found when I first started meditating, I found what really, really helped me, because when you meditate, you're really just trying to concentrate on your breathing. That's kind of like the short Cole's Notes version of meditation, which is true. That is basic meditation. I found that I had a really hard time concentrating my breathing. And so here's a little tip for people that can't sit still like I can. Because when I try to just concentrate on my breathing, my mind leaps about like an angry gazelle. I find what really, really helps. I use a rosary. A rosary is a collection of 55 beads. Well, it's more like 50 smaller beads and 5 larger beads, kind of in a chain. You've seen them on many taxi cab rear view mirrors. They usually have a crucifix at the very end. Most people should know what I'm talking about, hopefully. If you don't, look it up, rosary. I use those to count my breaths. I go around the rosary counting my breaths, and I find that it was like, this is a very effective way of doing it. You're not keeping your body entirely still, but just with a very small movement every time the breath goes in and then out, next bead. Breath in, breath out, next bead. If you're not totally going to jive with the whole Catholic side of that, mala beads, Buddhist mala beads, are very, very effective in this respect as well. If you're meditating, I think there's an app you can get called Insight Timer. I guess you could call that a tool. You can certainly use that, and it's very good for meditation. I think I'm one of those people, and I had to answer an email not too long ago, just like, how can one use technology? Again, I'm a little bit hesitant towards technology. I think I told the story before about how when I didn't have my scrying mirror with me, I used my iPad. When it's turned off, it's like a black mirror almost in a little way. I had some really fucked up poltergeist phenomenon happen after using it. Again, I don't think the Greco-Egyptian deity that I was invoking enjoyed it at all in any way, shape, or form. It was the kind of poltergeist activity where even people that they don't know that I'm a magician, they were commenting like, "What the fuck is happening in our house?" And it wasn't just like things going missing; it was things turning on, and like it was a bit nuts. Anyway, so I have not used my iPad as a Black Mirror since, and so I'm a little bit hesitant as far as this new technology as a magical tool specifically. Excel spreadsheets, that kind of stuff, you need to use it. Technology has made magic very, very easy to come by. If you pick up any Magic 101 book, they're going to say one thing, and they kind of all say this, is that every magician needs what's called a magical journal. And here's the thing. I actually agree with them. You know, I'm a bit of an iconoclast. I'm a contrarian, but in this respect, I think that it's totally needed. I think every magician should have a book where they can record, pre-spell what their goal is, write down the day of the spell or the ritual, what was the weather, what were the circumstances, any funny things that happened to you that day were a little bit spooky, then write down what the spell is going to be or the ritual, and then they can go back and they can have a look at it. I think it's incredibly essential.
Absolutely.
I definitely agree that a magical journal is something that every magician should have. I have two going right now, my regular one, and then I use one that's specifically for my Grimoire or Goetic-based magic. They help me quite a bit. It's just a way to keep things in order, to look at results at a later date. And it is one of those funny things. I was earlier today, I actually looked through one of my older magical diaries or magical journals, and it was hurting. I don't know. I think I was doing a lot of Enochian magic, which is John Dee's form of magic, talking to angels, and it was embarrassing. But as the great Oscar Wilde once said, I always take my diary with me when I go traveling. One should always have something sensational to read. So I don't disagree with this. Dream journals also I've talked about before, very essential. I have a dream journal, but I also have a place on the interwebs. I have a website that I will not give the address out. It's a very personal. I use people's names and whatnot. When I wake up, I record my dreams on my phone and then I upload it to the internet.
All right.
So this really helps me. A dream journal is quite essential in this regard. So the question is asked though, do you just buy things when you need them or should you make things? And I think in my honest opinion, I think things that you make carry far more weight than things you buy, or things that you were gifted are also a bit more advantageous in this regard. My scrying mirror is one that I've made. I want people to try and get out of their heads the idea of just creating a shopping list and then buying everything when they need it. I think with a lot of this stuff, you're going to want to create it. And here's why. Magic, I think, at base is about stories. I think stories are an essential part of magic and magic itself. There's other magicians that have been talking about this, and they have been for a long time. So Gordon White specifically said that it seems like the universe runs on narrative. And I would agree. I think that the stories of how you came to get these magical tools is as important as the ritual. I have an uncle who most of my knives I got from him. He was a very important figure in my life, extremely important. And he would help me make these wooden objects, my wands. One of them is one I made with him. All of my bowls. Just something being old isn't enough. I'm not saying that everybody should just go out and go antiquing to get all of their magical stuff, but it is a good way to acquire certain things. But I think the more personal story you have, the better it is. Again, the spirits seem to like stories. They really do. And I will say this over and over again in this podcast. If you think that the point of magic is for spirit communication and psi effects, like psychic effects, but more so spirit contact, and they interplay between the two of them, then the spirits, they're attracted by story. Like recognizes like. The spirits live on in our stories that we used to tell by the campfire. That's again why I think candles are extremely essential to magic. They are somehow embiggened and enjoy the story, and as long as it relates to you. Something that Colin Wilson once said was that there seems to be some underlying way that the universe is fueled by meaning. And I've tried to find a way around this. And I can't really, with my animist leanings, this seems to be true. This enchantment of the world and adding meaning to the world, and it's not just something that I think is very superficial. It seems to me that when I have magical objects that mean a great deal to me, they certainly help my magic more. My obsidian ball I got from a store in Guanajuato in Mexico. I had been looking for an obsidian ball, and I just didn't want to go to an occult store and get one. They're all over the place, but I needed one that had a bit of a story to it. And it was very strange. I was walking into the city in Mexico, Guanajuato. Beautiful. They have really strange things there. I'm not going to go into it. But I was walking on one of the streets, and I don't know why, but just something told me that I had to go into this store. And I'm not trying to be, wishy-washy, but it was just like something said that I will find my obsidian ball in this store. And I went in, and they had my obsidian ball, and so that's where I got it. That's a story to me. The pentacle that I use, there's another story, and I'll preface this with the fact that the area that I go to, I visit Mexico very often, and the area of Mexico I visit is called Michoacan. It's in central Mexico, and there was a judge/bishop called Vasco de Quiroga. And he's he's a conflicted, well, he's an interesting figure. But what he did is he took indigenous cultures and he kind of put them in towns. And as bad as that sounds, he was kind of like their champion in a strange way, because he said, look, geographically, this area has a lot of clay. I want you to concentrate on making clay pots and clay figures. This other town, you guys have a bit more wood. I want you to start making wooden figures for sale. This other town, they had an excess of copper, so he said, I want you to concentrate on copper building. And yeah, he was, as much as he kind of took indigenous cultures and put them in places, he got them to really pull themselves up by the bootstraps. I know that phrase is really stupid, but he got them to really do this. And so a lot of my magical objects come from Mexico, of all places, because of this. My pentacle, the story for there is I was visiting Santa Clara del Cobre, which is well known for its copper, and we were there for a tour in copper making. And there was a pile of copper that they were that wasn't selling, and they were going to melt it down to make other objects. It wasn't selling, so they're going to melt it down. They're going to make some more popular objects. Well, strangely enough, I came across a tetragrammaton pentagram, like the one that Eliphas Levi designed. It was going to be that afternoon. We're going to melt it down to make something new with it. I said, absolutely not. So I took it and I bought it, and I saved this pentagram, right? So there's a story there.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the more meaningful tools that you have around you that have a story to them, not just in how they were made, but more so like how you acquired them, the spirits, they prick their ears up. They listen to this kind of stuff. And as new agey as that sounds, I think it's really true. And it's been very effective for me. I want people to get away from this. I'm going to go to Amazon and I'm going to get an object because that's just what I'm going to do. I want people to get away from that. I still to this day do not have a Saint Cyprian statue. I can very easily order one from Amazon, but I'm waiting for the time when one comes to me. When I was in Mexico last, I found several of them. They just didn't seem right. They didn't seem perfect. Yeah. I think for a lot of my magical tools, and this is a good thing for people that are starting out in magic, I've talked before about sigils, basically creating squiggly lines for wish fulfillment. They can get you things. For a lot of my magical tools, I sigilize for them. And then eventually I'll find within like days, 2 weeks, something will pop up and it'll happen. If I need a magical, a table of art or something like that, I will walk outside and then there will just be one there, and it's nearly too perfect. I think for people that are starting out on magic, this is something to definitely do. Don't just go and buy the stuff. Sigilize for it and then wait, because it will come to you. And I found that it's an extremely effective way of acquiring these magical objects. So yes, stay with the stories. The stories are the most important part of the magical tools, not the money you pay for them. The last thing I want people to do is just have a list of things that they need. Oh, I want to scry. Oh, I want to do tarot cards. Really, really take your time to acquire these things. The story is maybe the most important part, and the spirits do listen. Other tools you need. Well, I think there are some tools that are not material-based that people need to have as magicians, and let's call them mental tools. And the two most important ones are the 2 C's, I call them. They are comparison and they are context. Now, I seem to mention this writer with every episode, and I'm going to mention him again. His name is Jeffrey Kripal. He wrote a book called Comparing Religions. He is a professor of comparative religion. This book is a fantastic book, and it goes through why comparison is such an essential thing. A comparison within religion, or just in comparison in general, is a very effective tool of being able to see the similarities and the differences between certain things. In this book, he basically sets out 6 things that you need to do to achieve proper comparison. And I'm going to kind of give you a small little summary of those 6 points here. So he says, always keep sameness and difference in some creative or constructive tension. The other thing you need to realize is that you always have to be aware of your perspective when you're comparing things. Like understand your story first, right? Another thing is that you take a concept or a complex and then you compare it to another one from another religion or another tradition or another culture. And then you add your perspective to that, right? And these can be concepts such as death or eschatology, which is what happens after you die. They can be about sex. They can be about taboos. You take these things and you try to compare them in your mind and see how they can function. A good example of this is, what do UFO contacts have to do with what I talked about earlier with Marian apparitions, the Virgin Mary appearing to peasants, to people that would be like the hillbillies that say they're getting anal probed. So that's something you can somewhat compare. And the most important part of this is that you add, well, what was the experience, right? Well, what was the experience that occurred with these two things? Another thing is that what you're comparing, they should be compared somewhat fairly. You don't take the best aspects of one religion or culture and compare it against the worst aspects of a religion or culture. That's just not fair. Do not choose a perspective that you have that privileges that worldview. This is extremely important as well. Kripal says that this is not a comparison, that is special pleading. It is not the comparative study of religion, it is religion. And it sounds easy to do, but no, it's very important. And then he says, challenge everything. Challenge not just your worldview, challenge everybody else's. We've been told for well over 100 years that you can't compare things, that you shouldn't. And especially professors like, well, you actually can't compare those two things. Yes, you fucking can. You really should. And I think that is one of the most essential tools that a magician can have. It is a university textbook, Comparing Religions by Jeffrey Kripal. It's a bit expensive, but it is a breathtaking work, and it needs to be read to understand fully why comparison is so essential to magic now. The other thing is context. And I think context, I don't need to rag on too much or elaborate too much. I think we know what context is. The context of an event or a place in time, and what were the feelings at the time. Although we'll never know for sure, there is enough literature out there to try and understand. You can kind of understand the era in which the Greek magical papyri was written. It was written by a Theban sorcerer. He was a jobbing sorcerer. So he was kind of making like house calls for people and doing these kind of things. You need to understand how Alexandria, the city, was at the time. Just kind of you need to understand the elements into the time that these magical texts or these rituals or these spells were cast. And that's why I find I have a really hard time meshing with the whole golden dawn. That's my third time making that joke. That I promise that's the last time I'll make this joke on this episode. Anyways, but it's hard for me using a context-based analysis of that system of magic and what was happening at the time. I understand why they did it, but it just it falls apart after like 15 years. Like they did not have the proper text to go off. They did not have the proper worldview. They used false worldviews. It's one of those things that when you use the 2 C's, you can unravel it very, very quickly, which is unfortunate because a lot of people have set up their lives basically following this supposed real system of magic. So the 2 C's, extremely important. You also get new praxis from doing some context based, because I don't want people that are getting started in magic. What you shouldn't do is only read books on magic. Please don't do this. Don't. You don't need to read a lot about magic to become a magician. I think it's as important for every For every book on magic you read, you need to read way more books on other topics. You need to read books on science. You need to read books on history, more specifically books on history, especially the history of the period of time that you want to study more. If you like Elizabethan magic, you need to read what was happening in the Elizabethan and Tudor era, the Tudor and Stuart era. I get new ways of practicing because of this. I think it was a book called Why Can the Dead Do Such Great Things about saints. And I was reading in there how they would peasants, they would bend coins. If somebody was sick, they would make an offering to the saint with money, but they would take the coin and they would bend it in half, and they would use it. And that's something I've taken with me, and I've used it, and it's actually quite effective. Another thing was that when they were making a petition to a saint, and they felt the saint wasn't listening to them, and I've used this, and I still do. The saint isn't listening to their petition. They will tie thorns around the statues. They will put it on its side. They will hang it upside down. If it's a painting, they will turn it towards the wall. And I read this and I was like, oh, I'm going to give that a shot. And this wasn't in a book of magic. This was in a book by a scholar. The book is enormous. You could beat a cat to death with it. Please don't beat cats to death. But I think by reading history, you will get a ton of practice from that as well, more so than you will from a lot of magic books. So that's incredibly, incredibly important. I think a lot of people think that I rag on science a lot, and I do, but here's the thing. I don't want people to understand this. My hero, he is not a magician. In fact, he's still alive to this day. His name is James Burke. And he is a science historian. He came up with a series of programs in the late 70s, in the 80s, and in the 90s. They're called Connections 1, Connections 2, and Connections 3. He also came up with probably one of the greatest programs of all time called The Day the Universe Changed. And he's all about the history of science and technology and how human beings have this crazy way of having a problem, and then they create a technology or a new system or a new paradigm. It's almost Kuhnian to solve that problem, which in turn creates other problems. And it's this weird cycle of history. Yeah. Anyways, the cat's out of the bag. But if I want people to understand kind of where I'm coming from with this whole program, look at James Burke. Okay, I'm definitely tipping my hat too much here. James Burke is my absolute hero. He's about science. I think that science is extremely important. We are in kind of like a strange way where science is not looking at the questions that are most pertinent to, I think, people's existence right now, which is a lack of meaning. Science is just turning its nose up, and I think that there will be an eventual flip. But please understand that looking only at magic, it does not help you. You need to go outside of magic and find new ways of investigating certain things, and reading just magic is foolish. Other texts, books, and looking at the context, at the era in which you're trying to study magic is as essential as reading just things on magic. And I'm going to leave it there. But if you kind of want to see where I'm coming at as far as this podcast is concerned, look no further than Mr. James Burke. And thank you, James. Some other mental tools I think people need are skepticism, obviously. And we're talking about Robert Anton Wilson's skepticism. We're talking about don't believe anybody else's bullshit. Also don't believe your own. I think it's very important.
I like that.
Yeah. Skepticism about everything. And it's tough not to come out the other side being an agnostic. I say that overall my worldview is somewhat agnostic because that's, I think, the best route for inquiry and the best route for gaining new knowledge. And the other one is very simple. The last of the mental tools I think a magician needs is an open mind. It might sound like, because I just keep bashing on systems of magic and other magicians, that I don't have an open mind. I do. In fact, it's because of my open mind that I find the problems with them, and I can just see, again, using comparison and using context, I can just kind of see the problems, and I know that this doesn't work. Unfortunately, this does not work. I guess what I'm trying to say here through all of this is with your magical tools, the one thing I don't want people to do, and if they're doing it now, I want them to stop LARPing. I want them to stop live action role-playing. I want people to stop doing this. This is very important. I think a lot of people get tied up in this whole... I find John Dee, and he has this system called Enochian, and he had these tables and these charts, and he looked into a glass, and he was able to talk to angels, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to have the exact same results. I want people to really get away from this. I love John Dee. I'm disgusted by the amount of LARPing that happens around his system of magic. His system of magic was so idiosyncratic and so his that anybody else trying to do it is just like, it's a pale comparison. And I've done Enochian magic. There was about a period of a year and a half where I was mainly Enochian, and the results were they're okay. I wouldn't say they were overly great, but they were something. But I came to the realization that he was so good at what he did and so pointed that his magical journey was his own. And when you come to that realization and realize that that's the way you need to take your magic forward, I think that then the world is really your oyster. And just to go back to what I said earlier, you're creating your magical story with the objects and the tools you surround yourself that have their own stories, with any object that you surround yourself with, and the narrative and how it enriches your spells, the book that you write to put your results down. Everything is the creation of your story, which is fundamentally at the end the fucking point of magic. Don't use somebody else's story. Fucking write your own. Get over this old, archaic, weird, austere, pseudo-Masonic fantasy. Fucking get your hands in the dirt and fucking do your own magic. And trust me, the results, it's like night and day. You will realize that why have I've been wasting my time trying to do somebody else's magic when I could have very well been doing my own. So with that, I hope everybody has a little bit of a. There were some glances edgeways, just into different areas, but I think tools are essential, but the stories behind them are even more so. And with that, that's the end of the program. Kyle.
I came in here looking for as you had put it yourself, that list.
Yeah.
And I'm more excited to be leaving with questions in regards to what it is that one wants to do rather than the tools that are needed to do it. Because if you don't know what you're doing, then you don't know what you need. Yeah. And I think that that whole mindset could be used towards magic, especially right now. Yeah. After this wonderful conversation we had, thoroughly enjoyed that. It was a great time. I got 110 questions, man. I got 1,000.
Here's the thing. I think we are going to have one of these days where it's going to be you and your brother. I think we're going to bring you guys in, and then you guys just. I'm literally going to have a timer on the table, and I was like, you guys get an hour. Yeah. And you guys get to ask me some questions.
We'll rock it.
And I think that would be that'd be a little fun to have. We'll probably do it in the new year, but I think that would be a wonderful way to get, because I'm sure everybody has questions for me. In fact, people are asking questions, and that's a wonderful thing. With that, that's the end of the show, everybody. I want to thank you for listening. Please head to whatmagicisthis.com. There you will find links to iTunes, to Google Play, to Stitcher, to Spotify, to TuneIn, to iHeartRadio, to Radio Public, to YouTube. They're all there. If they've got podcasts, I'm definitely listed. Also on my page, you will find some great show notes. Also on my webpage, you'll find links to my Twitter account, which is pretty active. You'll find links to my Instagram account, which is not as active, and then to my Facebook page, which it's okay, I guess. Guys, if you enjoy my podcast, if you could leave a review for me, especially on iTunes, that would be greatly appreciated. I know that people can. It's easy to just click a little star. 5 stars would be preferable. But if you could write a little ditty about me, I would absolutely love that. A review on iTunes would mean the absolute world to me. It would be both the trick and the treat, seeing as how this episode is probably going to be coming out on Halloween. Other than that, guys, thank you for listening, and we're going to end this program with the post-show quid pro quo. Kyle, are you ready? You look ready.
Sure.
All right, here you go, Kyle. Speaking of magical tools, if you had a highly effective magical wand and were given the opportunity to wave it in the air and make one thing disappear, and you just went boop, and it's like the thing never existed at all in any point in history. It's not like it's just gone. Like you erased it both in the past, the present, and the future. What would that thing be?
Scatting.
Scatting?
I fucking hate scatting.
Scatting?
Yeah, that whole like jazzy skibbity bop bop. I can't stand that shit, man. Drives me nuts.
So in the history of jazz, that's that small 15-minute segment in Ken Burns's jazz.
Oh, dude, I can't take it, man. And I love all music. The only type of music I don't like is scatting and happy hardcore. That's it. Happy hardcore is that like bad electronic music where it's just going and you got this like high pitched screaming going on in the background. Anyways, scatting, yeah.
You'd get rid of scatting.
Yeah, that's the first thing that came to mind.
I did not see that coming out. So Scatman Crothers is out of a job. He's just
out of here, man.
Crothers.
I just can't. I mean, it's like this. No disrespect to those who are enjoying scatting and skitty bop bop and this stuff, but for myself personally, first thing that came to mind is scatting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kyle. Wonderful answer.
Cheers, brother.
Thank you for coming in. We'll be sure to get you and your brother on this show sometime really soon. And that's the show, everybody. Thank you for listening. This has been What Magic Is This? My name is Douglas Batchelor, and we will talk at you soon. Bye-bye.